The TV studio buzzed with energy on this special night. The spotlights were extra bright, reflecting off the glossy black floors like mirrors. Giant LED screens lined the walls, showing swirling blue patterns. In the audience seats, everyone from Wall Street executives to regular people who followed Musk on social media sat waiting. They weren't just here for an interview. They were here for what felt like a historic moment. Victoria Caldwell wasn't just any TV host. Over the past decade, she'd become famous for breaking down powerful people. CEOs would leave her interviews sweating. Politicians would stumble over their words. Celebrities would crack under her precise questions. She never raised her voice or showed anger. She didn't need to. Her calm, steady questions were like surgical tools, finding weak spots and exposing them to the world. Now she was about to interview perhaps her biggest guest yet, Elon Musk. When Musk walked in, he looked different from what people expected. No fancy designer suit or flashy tie, just a simple black suit that looked like something you'd wear to a business meeting. He seemed completely at ease, almost entertained by all the fuss around him. While other guests might fidget or look nervous before facing Victoria, Musk looked like he was about to enjoy a casual chat with a friend. Victoria sat perfectly still, her dark hair pulled back severely, her expression serious. She wore a navy blue blazer that seemed to absorb the studio lights rather than reflect them. Her stack of notes sat perfectly aligned with the edge of her desk. When she tapped them once against the surface, everyone in the studio knew the show was about to begin. "Mr. Musk," she started, her voice smooth as silk but firm as steel. "You're called many things these days. A visionary, a disruptor, a genius." She paused for effect. "But you're also called reckless, irresponsible, even dangerous. Tonight, I want to ask what everyone's thinking. Should any single person, especially you, have this much control over where technology is heading?" The studio went so quiet, you could hear the hum of the air conditioning. This was classic Victoria, starting with a question that seemed simple, but was actually a carefully laid trap. Most guests would immediately try to defend themselves, and that's when she'd start picking apart their arguments. But Musk wasn't most guests. He tilted his head slightly, and a small smile played at the corners of his mouth. He knew exactly what she was doing, and instead of rushing to answer, he took his time. He glanced at the cameras, fully aware that millions were watching, then spoke in a calm, measured voice. "Control? That's an interesting word choice," he said, making it clear he wasn't going to fall for the trap. Victoria's eyes flickered with interest. Usually, when guests tried to dodge her questions, they looked nervous or defensive. Musk looked like he was enjoying a game of chess. "What would you call it then?" she asked, adjusting her strategy. "I'd call it influence," Musk replied, sitting back comfortably. "And it's influence that comes from creating new things, not from playing political games. When people buy a Tesla, or use Starlink internet, or adopt AI tools, it's because they see value in them. Nobody's forcing anyone to use my company's products." Victoria leaned forward slightly, her eyes narrowing. This was the moment she'd been waiting for. "But influence without accountability, Mr. Musk, is still power. Your companies control how people travel, how they communicate, how they access the internet. Some would say you have more influence than most world leaders. Doesn't that make you pause and think?" The audience murmured. She was painting him as a dangerous figure with too much power. But Musk's calm demeanor didn't crack. Instead, he exhaled softly and met her gaze with an intensity that matched hers. "That's a fascinating perspective," he said, and there was something knowing in his expression that made Victoria's grip on her pen tightened slightly. Let's talk about accountability then. He folded his hands in his lap and continued. When Tesla makes a car with a problem, we don't hide it. We recall every affected vehicle and fix it. When a SpaceX rocket fails, we don't cover it up. We broadcast it live and learn from our mistakes. He paused, letting his words sink in. Now, Victoria, when the media gets a story wrong, what happens? When journalists make mistakes, where's their recall process? The audience reaction was immediate. A wave of whispers and shifted positions. Victoria's expression remained composed, but something flickered behind her eyes. For the first time, she felt the conversation slipping away from her careful control. She tried to redirect, her voice taking on a sharper edge. This isn't about the media, Mr. Musk. This is about you and the future you're creating. Let's talk about artificial intelligence, OpenAI, Neuralink, XAI. These aren't just companies. They're reshaping what it means to be human. If AI becomes as powerful as you predict, should you be the one guiding its development? The tension in the studio increased. It was a loaded question that could make him appear reckless or dangerous. But Musk did something unexpected. He smiled. Not a nervous smile or a defensive one, but a genuine, almost amused expression that made Victoria hesitate for a fraction of a second. That's an important question, he said, still smiling. But let's take a step back. Who do you think should guide AI development? The shift was instant and powerful. Instead of defending himself, he'd turned the question back on her. Victoria's lips parted slightly in surprise, and she leaned back in her chair, a subtle move to regain composure, but also a sign that she was recalculating her approach. It's not about what I think, Mr. Musk, she replied smoothly. It's about whether the public trusts someone like you to make these crucial decisions. Musk nodded thoughtfully. Trust. That's really the heart of this conversation, isn't it? He glanced toward the audience, engaging them directly. So, let me ask you, Victoria, why do you think people trust me? Because you're a billionaire who built companies that change the world, she answered quickly. But that doesn't automatically qualify you to control humanity's future, especially when it comes to AI. Musk's smile widened. She had walked right into his next point. That's interesting, he mused. You say I shouldn't be guiding AI development. All right, who should? A government agency? Tech regulators? A committee of bureaucrats? He raised an eyebrow. Do you trust politicians more with that responsibility? The audience's reaction was immediate, more murmurs, some nervous laughter. Victoria didn't outwardly react, but Musk noticed her fingers tighten around her pen. She was losing ground, and she knew it. This isn't about politicians, she said carefully. It's about transparency, about whether the public has a voice in how AI develops and affects their lives. So, democracy? Musk asked, his voice light but pointed. Let me ask you this. How many people in this room understand machine learning, neural networks, recursive self-improvement? He looked around at the silent audience. How many people watching at home could meaningfully contribute to AI safety research? More silence. And yet you're suggesting these same people should be making decisions about it? The weight of his words settled over the studio. Victoria saw her control of the narrative slipping away, and Musk wasn't finished. Look, I understand the concern, he continued, his voice softer but still clear. AI is moving faster than anyone expected. It challenges everything. Our jobs, our creativity, even what it means to be human. But here's what I find interesting. You trust the media to handle this discussion honestly. Victoria's composure visibly tightened. It was subtle, just a slight narrowing of her eyes. But Musk had spent years reading people. He knew he had struck a nerve. She tried to recover, her voice sharper now. This isn't about the media. It's about accountability. You're avoiding the real question. Should the future of AI be in the hands of one man? Musk tilted his head slightly, looking almost amused. But I'm not avoiding anything, Victoria. I'm exposing the question itself. When she exhaled sharply through her nose, he continued. It's simple, really. If I say yes, that I alone should shape AI, I sound arrogant, right? He gestured to the audience. If I say no, that I shouldn't be involved, then what's the alternative? Should we hand it over to governments? Or maybe to other tech CEOs, the same ones who built social media algorithms designed to make people angry and addicted? Some audience members laughed softly. Victoria's grip on her pen tightened again. She could feel the interview slipping further from her grasp. So tell me, Victoria, Musk said, his voice cool and controlled, what's the right answer? For the first time that evening, Victoria Caldwell had no immediate response. The silence in the studio was deafening. Everyone felt the shift in power, and Musk wasn't done yet. Victoria recovered quickly. She hadn't become the most feared interviewer by giving up easily. She set her papers down deliberately, folded her hands together, and leaned forward. Let's say you're right, she said, her voice steady. Let's say no one else can be trusted. That still doesn't answer the fundamental question. She paused for effect. Mr. Musk, do you truly believe you're the right person to shape the future of humanity? It was a classic trap question, one designed to make him appear either egotistical or irresponsible. But Musk didn't hesitate. He leaned forward, matching her posture, and spoke in a lower, more deliberate voice. I don't believe I should shape the future of humanity, he said simply. Victoria's eyes widened slightly. She hadn't expected such a direct answer. Musk's gaze remained steady as he continued. I believe humanity should shape its own future. Then, with just the hint of a smirk, he added, I just build the tools. The audience erupted. Some people clapped, others exchanged knowing looks. Everyone in the room understood what had just happened. Victoria Caldwell, the interviewer known for breaking down the most powerful figures in the world, had lost control of her own show. But Victoria wasn't finished. She was a professional, and she had one last card to play. She smoothed her notes and leaned in once more. You've given us a lot to think about tonight, Mr. Musk, she said, her tone polished, but slightly softer. But before we end, I have one final question. She locked eyes with him. What do you say to critics who believe that men like you, billionaires, tech leaders, self-proclaimed visionaries, are just playing God? That you're not shaping the future for humanity, but for yourselves? It was her last attempt to frame him as a self-serving, power-hungry industrialist. If he dismissed it too quickly, he'd seem uncaring. If he defended himself too strongly, he'd seem guilty. Musk leaned back, relaxed but focused. I say they're giving me too much credit, he replied simply. The audience waited for more. So did Victoria. Musk's gaze swept across the studio, and when he spoke again, his words carried absolute certainty. You think I'm playing God? He shook his head. No, I'm just playing engineer. I don't dictate the future. I build things, and then the world decides if they're useful. He shrugged slightly. People chose to buy Teslas. They chose to use Starlink. They chose to launch satellites on Falcon 9 rockets instead of government ones. That's not control. That's choice. Victoria opened her mouth to respond, but Musk continued. If people don't like what I build, they can reject it. That's how innovation works. He paused for a moment, then delivered his final blow. You know what doesn't work that way? The media. The audience reaction was immediate. Some people clapped, others murmured excitedly, and many leaned forward, completely absorbed in what they were witnessing. Victoria Caldwell had built her career on shaping narratives, but tonight, the narrative had turned against her. She recovered her composure quickly, nodding once and smoothing over the closing. Elon Musk, thank you for your time. Thanks, Victoria, Musk replied with a slight nod. The cameras cut, and the live broadcast ended. But the real story was just beginning. Within minutes, clips from the interview flooded social media. Elon destroys MSM narrative started trending. The interview hit 5 million views on YouTube before midnight. The reactions were divided. Mainstream media outlets wrote headlines like Elon Musk dodges accountability intense interview, while tech journalists and independent voices praised him for turning the tables on traditional media. Musk himself responded in his characteristic style. At 12:42 a.m., he tweeted, "I'm just an engineer, but thanks for watching." The post gained over 2 million likes in 3 hours. Victoria Caldwell faced the aftermath with dignity, but the impact was undeniable. By morning, the interview had taken on a life of its own. Some defended her, saying she did her job and tried to hold Musk accountable. Others argued she had underestimated him and walked into her own traps. A week later, Musk sat in his Tesla, scrolling through his phone. His team had sent him the analytics. The interview had done more than boost his public image. It had fundamentally changed how people viewed media accountability. He smirked as he read another headline, "Musk versus Media, Who Really Won?" With a final glance at his phone, he typed a response under one of the trending posts. His fingers hovered for a moment. Then he wrote 2 simple words, "Round 2." He hit send, knowing that the media landscape would never be quite the same again. The story of that night became more than just an interview. It became a symbol of how traditional power structures could be challenged and changed. Victoria Caldwell had walked into her studio expecting another victory. Instead, she had witnessed the beginning of a new era in public discourse, where the old rules no longer applied and where truth, trust, and accountability were up for redefinition.